Hello, and welcome to Locutors of Trek, the podcast where we talk about the people, places, and things of Star Trek. So, replicate yourself a Romulan ale or your synth selection of choice, and join us far beyond the stars.
Locutors of Trek.
Program initiated. Enter when ready.
Well, hi there. My name's Dave,
And I'm Davan.
and we are your very own Locutors of Trek.
And plain
As
simple
well.
Tailors.
Indeed. And tonight, our long-awaited, epic 20th episode debuts, sets
Final
tone
of the
for
season.
us. Indeed, finale even. And for that august moment, we thought we'd mark the milestone with an episode about legacy. So, legacy comes, of course, from the notion of a legate in Rome, a legatio, even a legatus in the
Damar.
medieval, right? A legate, like exactly, legate damar, someone who is an envoy or deputed to do something. And in this case, this is what we depute to the past, or from the past to the future, let me say. What we hope will carry on, perhaps, or what remains despite our best intentions. So let's see what we can make with the time allotted to us this evening in our exploration of legacy and legate ship, perhaps.
And Legate Damar.
Resist. Resist today. Resist tomorrow.
And legate Damar. I don't want to explore him too closely. Maybe
No,
share a
not too close.
car with Damar.
You don't turn your back on a Cardassian.
No, no.
Some of you, loyal listeners, may be wondering, wait a minute, why isn't this episode about metaphysics? Because our last episode was a really long time ago, and I figured nobody wanted to wait any longer. So, and everything Dave said, and also Terry Matalas did say, writer of much of Picard Season 3, said that if he got to do another show, it would be called Star Trek Legacy. So it all just seemed to fall into place. And I thought,
Yeah.
also, we were planning on ending on the Season 1 on the 20th episode. So that gives me an entire season break to read that book on metaphysics, because I read really slow, and some might say think even slower.
Oh, that would hardly be fair. I think
well,
it should best be said
Some
that
might say.
good thinking requires percolation.
Maybe. So does good coffee.
That's true. Indeed. We'll steep ourselves in thoughts.
So why don't we get started off with one of our, what we used to call top fives, but I'm going with the top 10 now. We're combining our fives, perhaps even the low Q10 of Trek.
Oh, a low Q10. I like it.
This one's going to be, what did I call it when I said you? I like the way I worded it when I was talking to you.
Oh, let me see if I can find it.
Top 5 ideas for an episode of an anthology series called Star Trek Legacy. So, if Terry Matalas, or perhaps some of us here at the United Federation of Podcasts got to do a series called Star Trek Legacy that was an anthology and was meant to clear up whether it be past stories or past characters or characters we know, and use these actors while we still can, enjoy these characters we love while we still can. That's the way I took it anyway. I don't know how you interpreted this, but
well, dear listener, as you know, my first interpretation was certainly, do you mean a ship named USS Legacy?
yes, he did say that.
And when he said, not exactly, I sent a brief and possibly rejected, okay. But in fact, we're taking a broader approach. And I like this broader approach because there can be lots of spaceships in this approach. Don't you worry. Now, mine are in no particular order because each one I wrote
Well,
after the first one I liked even better. So I'm just going to
yeah,
pick them out and read
same
them
with
as they hit thematically here. The trouble is with this, I think that it would not be hard to write 14 seasons of this pretty quickly,
Okay, here's the
in
thing.
terms of
Here's the
just the
thing.
stuff you want to grab onto, right?
All we ever
I
get
want to see more
now
salt
is
vampires, for instance.
we got them in lower decks,
Oh, that's true.
but
That was a good return of
um,
salt vampires.
it was. Dude, she's totally a salt vampire. No, she isn't. Ah, salt vampire. I love lower decks. Uh,
Uh,
so, well, the thing is, we only ever get like 10 episode seasons of Star Trek now. So our combined 10 is basically that could be
that's true.
the first season
That's
of a
true.
Star Trek Legacy. And especially since you and I usually throw in an extra one or two, it's basically we get a
That's
12
true.
episode anthology.
That's true.
Did you want to go first or should
20%
I?
more. Oh, I can throw one up first.
Okay, throw one
Let's
out.
start. Let's start on a whimsical note.
I love whimsy.
This
You know I love
is
whimsy.
this is a light-hearted start to the whole thing. Begins with these fateful words: "This shuttle, my cousin Gayla sold her to me years ago. Let me tell you about when we went to take your father to Earth. Our favorite Ferengi, Quark, engages in a high stakes, high shenanigans adventure in the Delta Quadrant after receiving a distress signal from Pell,
I like to try new things.
mentioning a lucrative but dangerous opportunity. Quark takes his layabout great nephew Ben, son of Nog, along as amanuensis.
What? What? Son of Nog. Wow, called Ben. Oh, wow. Wow,
Uh-huh.
you really thought that through. We got to get writer's room back on.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
man.
true. That's true. We really do.
Let's get that in the
I got
list.
to get my documents together and we got to get her going.
Yeah. Let's do that because that's a good show. All of our segments have
Yeah.
gone and become shows of their own, but that's, it shows the strength of the segments.
That's true. It's true. I think, when you got a good idea, you got to run with it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's an idea that's got some legs. I
Man,
love seeing
that's
Ivan Shimmerman with the Quark teeth in.
so so Pell's in the Delta Quadrant?
Well, Pell had to go somewhere, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I
Uh
love revisiting Pell. She was an awesome character.
I really liked Pell a lot. And I think she's a Ferengi female who would motivate Quark in his particular, because he's always going to be caught by his desire to be what he understands to be a good Ferengi. Because that's like deep material for him, right? No matter how close he ever gets to the reformed Ferengi tradition in terms of his practice, some element of him is always going to be, as far as
He's
Ferengi
a
can
good
get to it,
Ferengi.
reaction. Right? He's going to be
He's a good Ferengi.
reactionary against the new order in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So, but
Uh,
I think the struggle with Pell, as well as struggling to figure out what to teach his his great nephew during the time that he's got him, you know, it could almost have like a screw tape letters feel to it too, right? Like the log entries would be wonderful. They could be back and forth. Oh man.
mhm.
They could just be
No, I
snarking
like it
about
a
each
lot.
other like in a confessional. Oh yeah, man.
I just deleted Quark from my list here because I liked yours so much.
Oh
So,
my goodness. Oh my
yes,
goodness. Now
indeed.
you've
Indeed,
piqued
indeed.
my curiosity forever.
Well, it's funny that you sent Pell to the Delta Quadrant because
Hmm.
remember, if you remember in the comic we reviewed on Treckle Trunk, check that out.
Yes.
Pell was in the Gamma Quadrant, like setting up a place for freed Ferengi females.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So Pell's getting around regardless.
Yes. I don't know how she gets to the Delta Quadrant, but I thought that'd be a fun place to drop Quark.
No, I like
Somewhere that
that.
he would
It
have
would
no
be
experience of.
like he would just his mind would go crazy on the potential profits. Like there's no
Oh
Ferengi.
my
Like that's the way
goodness.
they view profits. They're just like, have any Ferengi gotten there? No. Oh,
Exactly.
because if a Ferengi has gotten there,
The
then it's
barrel.
depleted and corrupt. The reputation's destroyed. Like there's nothing you can work with. Like
It's true. It
imagine
just
how
was like rolled out
Ferengi.
the red carpet.
Imagine how
I mean,
Frankie
we get
must feel about First Contact.
oh
It's
well,
just like
we
this
see a
beautiful
beautiful version of it,
opportunity to exploit, you know.
right?
It's just like,
And we see
yeah,
a great
oh, we
episode of
do.
that in Voyager. That's true.
And
You know,
Little Green Men even.
yep, yeah, it's
Um,
true.
oh, that's a
Um,
good one. Okay.
so
Okay,
now
so
what's your throw up here? Or I mean,
I like that you
answer.
put a lot into these. So here's an interesting one. Okay, so because I do want to see. Okay, so we're returning to the Nexus
Oh,
because
oh,
because as
oh,
Guinan in the Nexus said, once you're in the Nexus, like you're basically a part of you is always in the Nexus. That's how they went and got Kirk. That's how
yeah.
Guinan was there. Like you're always there. So even though Kirk died at the end of Generations, and unceremoniously, some would say, like not the ending some perhaps even myself would want for Kirk. Though as a kid I loved that movie. But as I've aged, I'm like I
Oh,
kind of wanted more for the end of that character, William Shatner's
mm-hmm,
portrayal of Kirk.
mm-hmm.
It was fun.
But William Shatner could still play Kirk, and William Shatner is still an amazing actor. Um,
Yeah,
he could still play Captain Kirk.
for
He's
sure.
a phenomenal friggin' actor, and I would love to see it. So we go back to get him out of the Nexus. So who to send? I was thinking about that, and like Picard's the obvious choice because they've met before, but then it's just Generations again.
Yeah.
So it's just like, who do you want to who do you want to see interact with Kirk? You know,
Oh.
and like
I
so.
mean, some part of me wants Ben Cisco too, because he had that one moment of almost
Me
interacting
too.
with him
Me
on the
too. But
bridge.
Ben Cisco's later on my list, obviously.
Okay. Oh, I'm assuming he's going to show up somewhere. Yes.
Excuse me, Captain. Here's tomorrow's duty roster for your approval. Lieutenant Benjamin Sisko, sir. I've been on temporary assignment here. Before I leave, I just want to say it's been an honor serving with you, sir. All right, Lieutenant, carry on. Thank you, sir.
But yes, he's the obvious choice for me too. But like, I don't know. What if it was like Worf,
Oh, that'd be great with a Kirk dynamic,
like a
because
Worf
Kirk would
Kirk
have like
adventure
no time for Worf at all.
for Klingons? Like
Right? He would
he
be
would have
like,
no
I
time.
don't know what kind of weird Klingon you are, but still don't trust you.
Like Worf would try to give him attitude, and Kirk's attitude toward him would just be like way worse.
He
So
would
that would
literally
just
grab
throw
a door
Worf.
frame and swing his legs into Worf.
Yeah.
Like that first
So
fight would be amazing. The stuntman would have to do all the work because we don't want to risk William Shatner on that.
and
But
Worf knows that Kirk's in the Nexus because he would hear this from Picard. So Worf
that's
gets trapped
true.
in the Nexus and he needs help. So he goes for, like, you'd think he would go for Picard because Picard was in the Nexus. But there's going to have to be some storyline reason why that doesn't happen because I just want the Worf Kirk adventure.
That'd be great
So
fun.
it's not an airtight plot yet. I only had a few minutes to
Hmm.
think about it. But you could
I
throw
think
Picard in
it's.
there too, actually. But I really just want the no. It's just Generations again. I just want the Worf Kirk adventure. See, the thing is, here's what I forgot to mention. I forgot about that. I did
Hmm.
think about this. So it's not a Nexus adventure. It's just like um, Kirk gets plucked from the Nexus. Worf doesn't go to the Nexus.
They just need a copy of Kirk, basically.
Yes, Kirk gets
Yeah.
plucked from the Nexus somehow, and like yeah, and then Worf Kirk adventure in our universe.
Oh.
No time travel shenanigans. Kirk's just back. He's out. He's he's ready to have an adventure with Worf one final time. It'd be amazing.
Whoo.
That's
That'd
what
be
I want.
great. Because that guy knows how to adventure with Klingons. He's been to Repente, man. That guy knows the ups and downs of Klingon life.
It could go to Repente.
Right? Who does Worf know anybody out of Repente?
Actually, you know what? Worf's in my other one. I just kind of made up this Worf thing. Maybe it's
But you
not
could
gonna be
there's
Worf. Who
there's some
should it be
great
then?
fun
I just wanted to pluck Kirk from the Nexus. Like I
now
thought
now
Cisco. I
now
thought Worf. But
let me pitch you something. How
mm,
does he get out of the Nexus?
well, somebody's
A
near it.
certain curly haired Irish Starfleet chief.
Oh, Chief and Kirk.
Brian and Kirk.
It. You've done it, sir. You've salvaged my idea.
See, because he
But
could
I need
keep
more
trying
for
to
later.
compare O'Brien to Scotty, and there could be some wonderful jokes
Oh,
like
that's amazing.
distinguishing
Oh,
the.
that's
Right, it would be.
amazing.
I like the idea a lot. And you could clinch it on how does he get him out of the Nexus, you know?
What's the Nexus?
The energy ribbon that destroyed that ship was not just some random phenomena traveling through the universe. It's a doorway to another place that we call the Nexus. And it's a place I've tried very, very hard to forget.
See, we're
O'Brien
playing
pulls
music
some.
here. This is plain simple
Whew.
Tailors at its finest.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
an
yeah.
excellent riff, sir.
Thank you. I love that idea.
But yeah, okay, it's
Uh,
Chief transports Kirk out of the Nexus.
because how many, and also, I
So,
mean, how many copies of the Chief have we seen, right? There's
Smiley
also
O'Brien.
that. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then his many temporal
Oh,
moves
that's true.
forward. Yeah, man. All right. So you were talking about Worf. I'm going to throw my Worf one in here.
All right, we all got Worf. I erased
we
Worf
all
on that for O'Brien on that one, but Worf is coming back.
we've all got a Worf one. No, I hope. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do a different one first. I'm going to do different because
Okay.
this one's also fun. This one is kind of thematically not that different, but I think it's fun. Selah, back
Selah.
to haunt
Oh
the
my God.
Federation at the helm of a splinter Romulan empire, wielding spatial trajector technology from the reclamation site. A Guinan, Data, and Picard story.
Guinan, Data, and Picard story. Interesting.
Guinan for Enterprise C, Data for the
Yeah.
relationship to her mother. He may
Yeah.
have an emotional pull back because even though her mother was sort of weak and did all those things, Data may be this odd figure in there that she told her about, and then Picard obviously because Picard and Data bested her
It could be like
in the net.
yeah, it could just kind of be like a fun little addendum to the Picard series. It's just like, and here's the fun little wacky adventure at the end. Not wacky though, because they didn't really get to delve into the Romulans a whole lot. They
No,
did a bit
no,
in
and
the
there's a
first
lot of
season.
latitude still even left after the first season. You're
Yeah,
right. They just looked
yeah,
at that one aspect of what Romulans were kind of doing, and then a
yeah.
couple of
Like,
the planets where they
but like,
settled.
where's Sela? Like, of course, like she would be like working so many angles
Like
in
she would
such
be
a
working to put the
situation.
Tal Shiar back together, or she would be
Oh
working to
yeah,
put
if
the.
it ever crumbled, which it probably didn't.
No, they probably just retreated to somewhere way in the back of Romulan
Yeah,
space or something.
started building ships and shit.
Yeah, I mean, forgot like how many of our governments now have sites that they would take all the key people back to in the event of something crazy happening. You got to imagine that these interstellar civilizations would as well, right? They're going to have some planet to fall back to because, like even Starfleet or the Federation has something like Memory Alpha, right? In case Earth gets hit, they've still got Memory Alpha. In case somewhere gets hit, you know, uh, and they've probably even got other star bases deep in space that can act like alternate seats of government if need be, I'm sure. But I suppose that would also fall to starships at various points, much like we see depicted
Okay,
in something like Battlestar Galactica.
sure.
Yeah. Anyway.
My next one. Okay, I gotta salvage my last one. I need you to rescue me on that last one. So the Worf
Okay.
thing would have been fine. I'm just saying,
Oh,
but
sure.
O'Brien's better. O'Brien's better. So this one, you may recall the TNG episode where I can't remember her name now. Was it Amanda something who ended up turning into a Q but didn't know
Yeah,
she was
yeah,
a
yeah,
Q?
yeah.
Was that True Q the episode?
Something like that.
Um, but you know who
Uh,
I'm talking about, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, I
So it's just
absolutely do.
it's the idea that there are entities out there that believe themselves to be human or perhaps Vulcan or
Mm,
Andorian or who knows, but are actually going to manifest kind of X-Men mutant style into Q, right?
mm-hmm.
So it turns out, Dave, you may not know this, but it happened again. It wasn't just this
Ooh.
young lady from TNG, but there was another person who we know, but unfortunately died. But turns out they were a Q, so they're not dead. And that is, of course, none other than Lon Suitor.
Oh
So
no!
Lon Suitor is a Q,
This just turned into the X-Files right away,
and
man.
and that's
Woo!
an episode. That's the episode. I don't need to say anymore.
Oh
Lon Suitor
man!
is alive, and he's a Q. I don't care who they send to stop it. I mean, it's gonna have to be like Janeway.
Oh my gosh!
Janeway's gonna have to stop Lon Suitor the Q.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's basically, yeah, it's a Janeway, Harry, and
I could see Tuvok in there too.
Tuvok story.
Yeah, I could see
Yeah,
Tuvok in there.
yeah,
They did a lot of work together. But that would be great. Janeway, Harry, Tuvok. Oh man.
and
Whew.
of course the Doctor.
Oh well. I mean, any excuse to
And you know what?
bring
You need
Robert
B'Elanna too.
Picardo.
She's gonna get back. You know what? She gets the whole gang back together. It's a Voyager reunion episode
The
because it's
old
gonna take the
gang.
entire crew to stop Lon Suitor the Q.
Well, then let me pitch you
Mm.
the maybe final episode in the first couple where Captain Janeway is getting the crew back together.
Okay.
Chakotay greets Admiral Janeway as she descends from the Voyager A's landing ramp.
Oh my, Voyager, eh?
It's been a long time, she says. Yet here you are, back in the DMZ, chasing renegades. Welcome, Catherine. I'm glad you came. A number of remnant human populations were abandoned after the collapse of Cardassia. Chakotay has been living with them, trying to rebuild for the last 15 years, since Starfleet declared that since they would not go to Romulus, neither would they go there.
Ote is helping rebuild Cardassia
No, he's helping rebuild some of the populations, particularly of
in the
um,
DMZ.
in
Like,
the DMZ, who had been
okay,
who had been sort of signed away by the Federation.
he's rebuilding all the Maquis colonies.
He's helping to, yeah.
Oh wow, that's
Particularly
interesting.
those ones
Okay,
like, because you remember the episode where Wesley Crusher leaves TNG, right? It's on that sort of First Nations resettled
yeah, a terrible
uh,
episode,
kind of
but
thing,
yes.
right? Not a great episode, but I was thinking the whole idea could be a wonderful way to like actually depict some sort of futurist neo First Nations culture in a way that would be respectful, as opposed to the legacy of Voyager
Ooh.
in respect of Robert Beltran, right? And you know the terrible fraud of a guy that sort of supplied them with a lot of stuff
Mhm. A bit of
on
a
the
snake
show,
oil
right?
salesman there.
Exactly. So I thought it'd be a nice way
Maki
to
Highwater, I think he called himself, something like that.
yeah, exactly.
Name was like his
Yeah.
name was like Jerry Goldsmith or something. No, but
Yeah, man.
but yeah, okay. Well, okay, that's good. See, these episodes are connecting, so we could actually build
So
a season
you
around
could have
this.
a couple. You could have a couple there that
My
go
next one
together.
will just
Two-parter.
we'll move a little away from the DMC and go to Cardassia herself.
Ooh, Cardassia.
Because I want to go back to Cardassia with Garrick, and I want to
Oh
see
yeah.
how an anthology episode, and any of these could be two-parters if they need be. My next one has to be a two-parter, but this one could be
All
a
right.
single episode. It's fine, but you rejoin we rejoin. I'm trying to think of who else we could throw there, but the only Cardassian we know that's left alive basically is Garrick. um,
Yeah. Although Gulmasset might still be alive, so there is a way to bring back Mark Alimo.
You're right, there is. That's genius. Moset is definitely alive. Okay.
He'd have to wear the mustache though. He'd have to
He'd
have the
have to wear the
mustache.
mustache, but he'd be fine with that. Okay. Oh, Dave, you are just sprinkling gold all over my
So
ideas
I
here.
am inspired this evening by these
Well,
suggestions.
I can tell. So
Whew,
it's a Garrick Gull Moset buddy tale, but as they
whew.
rebuild Cardassia, and I wanted to see how beyond that how much it kind of resembles A Stitch in Time, because
Oh
there was a
yeah.
lot of good stuff there on the rebuilding of Cardassia, so you can kind of blend that in with this Gull Moset uh,
Hmm.
Garrick story.
Well, and
Genius.
if and it could be set slightly after the time a Stitch in Time would be set, so all that stuff could technically even be assumed, right?
And
Uh,
we'd have them come up against um um oh my god, Madred.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
He'd be a bit of an antagonist.
That'd be
And
great. I'm sure
Garrick
he
would be
would be
like,
on
I
the other
see like
side.
45 lights, motherfucker, you don't know. How many lights in my
I
eye?
see all the lights. Yeah, man. Well, now speaking about rebuilding society, they're back. The slugs from
Oh, it
TNG
had to happen.
season 1, episode
It had to happen.
25 have worked their way back toward Earth, but this time they've decided to take a different approach. They're using the Orion Syndicate because they want to make use of the pheromonal control they can
And they're
operate on
everywhere.
others. And they're everywhere. At the
Yeah,
highest levels, they can enforce their will immediately.
it's a very cool way to bring both those slugs back and also the Orion Syndicate, who are very cool, into a
And
story.
they don't get a whole lot of play, you know. Uh, it would also shake them up a
Really,
little bit, right?
really, your fairy tales don't start with a heist. All Orion fairy tales start with a heist. Or as we call them, heist tales.
Some Orions haven't been pirates for nearly 5 years.
Nearly 5 years. Oh god, Tendy's the best. We're gonna
Oh,
talk
what a
about Lower Decks a
character.
lot apparently because it's a great show.
Oh, what a
Um,
show. It is pretty great.
so
Um,
man, that's great. I like that a lot.
I think
Yeah,
it's got legs and even a
because they're
nerve cord
everywhere,
and
man, and
spine.
it's like they're already after the Orion Syndicate is the thing.
Yeah,
So like, there's already like people in place to notice this sort of thing happening to start working against it, which would be interesting. Who would you have kind of lead the charge against this?
see now this is where I'm stuck. I've got the idea on the big scale, but like other because like O'Brien's had a good Orion Syndicate. This might be a good Bashir story because he's done some intelligent stuff. You could do Bashir Garrick, although it'd be hard to bring Garrick out from Cardassia. That would be the tricky part.
Yeah.
But
Was O'Brien was there during that initial encounter to slugs as
that's
well.
true. That's true, and
We
he
can put
met. Yeah, that's
O'Brien in
true.
every story because he's fantastic. Make
That's
it
true.
make it an O'Brien Keiko story where
Oh
they have to work
man,
together. Because we never really get a good story where they have to work together to solve a
that
problem.
would be awesome.
And Keiko's still acting a lot, Rosalind Chow. So
Yeah,
just like
indeed.
Colmini still is, like they're still at the top of their craft. That would just be fantastic.
Oh my God, can you
There
imagine
you
that?
go, a little gold
And
onto your idea, sir.
I wonder if whoever played Molly is still acting or would be willing to come back. Wouldn't
Well,
that
she's
be
still
great?
acting, but she's around. She'd do it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure she'd
I've
do
seen
one
her on
episode of
like
the thing.
podcasts and stuff.
Oh man, that'd be great fun.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. Oh,
yeah.
that's
Molly.
awesome.
Make it a Molly
Oh,
story too.
Brian
You're
and Kate.
right. Get Molly in there. Make the
Yeah, yeah.
family, the Bryan family.
They'd have to get
Oh,
the family
so
back
good.
together.
This is the best
We're
top
getting
5
the
we've ever
family
done.
back together. All
All right.
right.
Well, here's another one. Okay, here's my
All right.
two-parter. So, because basically the first episode could just be a scene in the beginning if you want, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that does.
So it
Uh,
deserves maybe more than a cold open, eh?
yeah, it could be because basically, in the end, Martok's going to be assassinated as leader of
Ooh,
the
oh
Klingon
my
Empire. But
goodness.
but I don't want to JG Hertzler to go out in a cold open. So give him a full episode of like, and it's more interesting
Sure.
that way. His life as the chancellor, and like you can sort of build some intrigue
Mm-hmm.
that way. The people who may be working against him and why, that type of thing for an episode. It makes the second part
Mm-hmm.
way
Mm-hmm.
better. So this one's a two-parter. So you get JG Hertzler in there, and at the end of it, he knows something like people are working against him. So he calls his buddy Worf to help him. So this is why I need Worf, and I took him out of the Kirk story, though. You could still have him dabbled it, sprinkled into that Kirk
Oh,
story.
sure.
But uh, so Worf shows up,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on vacation with his family. Which is basically just his mother, father, Alexander, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Vacation. I don't know. He was visiting them, that type. So he goes to Martok Wharf, and then as soon as Worf gets there, Martok is killed by who knows? Is it the Duras? Who knows? Maybe it's the Duras, but maybe it's not the Duras. Maybe
Oh
it's a new family
man.
entering the fray. But that new family, if they enter the fray, still probably working with the Duras. So
Mm-hmm.
there's always Duras around.
Oh,
Taral's
there's
still
the
alive,
dude.
right?
Oh man. That's
Um,
exactly it.
yeah. So yeah, they didn't
Oh,
kill
I'm loving
Taral,
this
did
story
they?
already. Nope.
Like they showed Taral when he was
Nope.
older. He came back, but they didn't
Yeah,
kill
he
him.
comes back, but no, they beat him to the
No.
punch, but they don't I don't think
Yeah,
ever have
yeah.
a final confrontation with him that's
Okay, so
decisive.
that works.
Yeah.
So then, part two, it's big. The intrigue, Worf trying to figure out what to do. Like people are scrambling. This new person, Martok's assassin, is now the leader of the Klingon Empire for having killed Martok. And Worf,
Right.
can't have that or anything. So Worf's working on his plan to take down Martok. Not take down Martok's killer, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like, I got to do it. He's still a Starfleet officer, but he's just like, no, I got to do the whole Klingon murder thing, even though it, some people aren't going to like it, and it's not going to be easy.
I mean, he's done it before.
This person is heavily guarded because this person knows Worf's done it before.
That's
So
true.
anyway, there's a final confrontation. Worf confronts this person, and big fight. Worf taking on people. They're like the bodyguards and the main assassin, and all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
you see the assassin fall, and who's standing over the assassin? Dead? Alexander Roshenko. And he claims
Oh!
leadership. Alexander claims leadership of the Klingon Empire for House Roshenko. And now House
Oh!
Rosh rules the Klingon Empire, and Alexander, someone who's more influential ways, can bring Klingons into like the modern age.
Oh my goodness. Now, can I
What a
make
great
this
hero
into
he
a
becomes.
three?
And Worf is proud of him. Worf's just like, Alexander, I will speak your name every day from now on and not forget you've
That's
existed as I have done.
no, that is a beautiful story. Can I weave a third episode
Yes.
around this two-parter? In the midst of
Please.
all this
Keep on it.
action, Worf has his own troubles because
Okay, good. So
an
mine's like the third
assassin.
parter. Is yours like the second part of my of
Well, this could be well. I think there's enough for 3 episodes here. Yeah. So in the midst of this, literally as a long
yeah.
running red herring through this, there's a pair. What he thinks is a singular, but turns out to be a pair of assassins after him, after Worf.
Oh my!
And it turns out,
Unrelated to this Martok business.
well, who knows? And what he figures out
Who
is
knows? Okay.
in the end, he captures the larger of the two, and it turns out to be his brother Kern. Memory re-scrambled
Oh,
by
yay!
Tural, son of Duras,
Oh no!
as
Why
an
would he
act
do
of
that?
revenge personally against Worf. Worf
Oh,
dishonored
because
him
he
so
thinks.
badly by allowing to live,
Oh,
right?
so
Like
now
he
Kern's coming
stole,
after him.
so he's programmed his brother to come after him,
Oh
and
no!
he's also, because of the ties of honor, brought Kern under his new identity that he had, has brought his son, who he, for whatever reason, maybe subconscious, named Moog, along with him to try and take down this dude who Moog doesn't know is his uncle.
We broke up. That didn't come through.
Oh, sorry. So Kern has had his memory scrambled by Toral, son of Duras, and to aid
Yeah.
him, he's brought along the son he's had since he joined the other house in DS9,
Oh my God! What's his name?
Moog.
Oh my God! Of course. But why would he know the name Moog?
He doesn't. It's in his subconscious.
Oh my God! That's even more amazing. Oh my God! You are inspired tonight.
But then, so these ones, they've got to both save Kern's son Moog, which makes Alexander's appearance that much more of an insane twist, right? Maybe there's a shadowy figure that saves him a couple of times from assassins. Who knows?
Okay. Is this
But
my
yeah,
last one?
whoo! Oh my God.
Yes, this is my last
This
one.
is hot.
Okay, so
This
here's
we're coming in hot here.
this is man, we are coming in hot, man.
Whoo!
So this one, feel free to add anything to this one too, because this is the one
All
I want
right.
to see the most. So of course the Cisco is returning. And you know
All
what? I'm
right.
thinking what brings the Cisco home? You know, you and cousin Dave and even myself to perhaps a little lesser degree weren't quite satisfied with the comic return that we've had
Mm-hmm.
because it just and I agree with you when I because I think my idea is better. So I'm like their whole thing is he's in that comic. They're all like he's like a god fighter. He's somebody who takes and
Yeah.
like fun for Benjamin. Is is it Earth? Is, no, it's no. Is deep space the station.
Uh-huh.
Now wanted to be the pirate. It's the main thing. They all grew
Ooh, the pirates.
around, but we're breaking. We got bad internet
Yeah, I'm losing
connections
you.
here for
I
some
lost
reason.
you there on your last sentence there. What
So
about the
can you hear me?
pirates? Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, yeah.
Your whole explanation there was kind of chunky.
You're yeah.
Man, it's really chunking up tonight, eh?
It's pretty
Just a minute. I'm going to
bad.
see if I can drop my camera down to lowest definition. See if all that stuff I can set to everything as low streaming as possible, because we don't need any kind of picture quality or anything. Are you frozen right now, or are you just not moving? Oh no, yeah, you're chunking out. Well, we got to really
You're all
yeah, I
oh,
think I'm frozen for you and you're frozen for me.
So but can you hear me?
I can hear you really chunked up. It's like you're on a cell phone going through a tunnel. Do you wanna try coming out and oh no, because we'll have to lose this part of the recording, won't we? Do you want to pop out and come back in, and then if that doesn't work, I'll pop out and come back in? So yeah,
Okay,
why don't
so
we
the
start
Cisco
right from the
is
start of that one again?
okay. So my last one, Cisco. No, well, no, because I want to keep that whole preamble about where his home is. Okay, so Cisco's
Okay.
back, and he has to save
Okay.
the station. And who does he have? Because the entire station is incapacitated, and
Oh my goodness.
of course, that threatens Bajor and the
Mm-hmm.
Federation, and is taken over by a hostile entity. Like I don't know. Like maybe the Romulans, like you could fall right in with that Sayla splinter
Oh
cell thing.
yeah.
Maybe
Yeah. I can
I
see
don't
that.
even know, but like I never really thought about the hostile entity because what's really important is the
Mm-hmm.
only person left to help Benjamin save the station and Bajor and the Federation because the whole station is incapacitated is of course none other than Vic Fontaine. So this is a Ben
Oh,
Cisco.
Vic
Vic
Fontaine
Fontaine
adventure. Oh
save
my
the
goodness.
Federation story. That's what I want. That's the return of
Oh
the Cisco
man.
I want.
Oh, Cisco and Fontaine.
Yeah, because and that's an interesting dynamic. Because at first he wasn't comfortable there, Cisco, but they sort of made up at the end there
Yep.
and sung a song together, so they have a bit of camaraderie, but also a
Well,
bit of an uneasiness as well.
and
So it's an
like what they
interesting
did,
dynamic.
but now, so with this could also have, in a sense, the dynamic of a heist. You could recall things like the Fabulous Ferengi or Magnificent Ferengi, where they're running around a
Be a
different
heist
sort of
tale.
station, or there could be
Very
moments to
heist.
recall Empok Nor, even, right? Where,
You-
like, I guess what I'm thinking is all these different lights in which you could cast the station. You know, is it a set of suspense and fear? Is it like they're running down the hallway? Is it like, because it's been so many things,
What if it's a
and does that
standoff between Deep Space Nine and Empok Nor?
oh, somebody's brought Empok Nor back
Yes,
online and
yes.
figured out how to
And
move
it's
it.
station versus station. But
Oh
like it's not even
man.
station versus station because of course Deep Space Nine has received more advancements because the hostile entity has both. And it's up to
Right.
Ben and Vic on Deep Space Nine to retake Deep Space Nine and then overpower
And to
Empok
then,
Nor.
yeah, exactly. Oh man. That's a great story. Because Empok Nor could have taken years getting there. You
Yep.
know, if they had used O'Brien's trick to sustain a warp bubble for enough time to get them just moving in space, then they might have just used shields to stay there, or whatever.
I mean, perhaps they
Uh,
have some trick, some space. See
yeah.
that? No, the spatial trajectors. Back to your story.
Oh yeah. Or
See,
transwarp tunnel. That's all would also be on the reclamation site. That stuff would be out there. That'd be a great way to move a space station around. Drop it through a transwarp, whatever it
conduit.
is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
if you can do it to a Borg cube, you can do it to a station.
Yeah, they're not really built for flight, that's for sure. Oh, oh man, I would love to see that. Ooh,
So, why don't we get into the legacy of Star Trek? Here's what I was
all
thinking.
right.
Why don't we run through what we think the legacy, perhaps, of each series is, and if any particular character or actor we want to talk about, we'll do that as we think. And then at the end,
Sure,
of course, the legacy of Star Trek itself.
sure.
So why don't we start with TOS, of course. What do you think? What do you think the legacy of TOS is? Now, one thing I will say about the legacy of a couple characters here,
Mm-hmm.
if of course Spock has had a huge legacy on Star Trek and pop culture, and I think that'll carry forward into the future. And I think what that is that logic is an okay and perhaps even a good first option. Like
Yes.
they make it very clear that it's not always the be all end all. Logic can't get you out of every situation, and sometimes isn't always the best option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
But it
Tuvok will make that
has
concession about Janeway. He's like, yeah, sometimes Janeway does
absolutely.
completely illogical shit, but it works, and I've learned to trust it because she knows when to do that completely illogical shit. Apparently,
Yeah,
but
exactly, right?
like,
You know that
uh,
that
uh,
and in interesting ways, that fundamental sort of search for balance between, say, reason and emotion, logic and the heart, which really does, I think, thematically dominate the original series more maybe than any other series, even though they all hearken to it in some ways. Uh, like it reaches right back in some ways to the origin of film, right? Like, who is it? Fritz Lang, is it? Am I thinking of the right guy in Metropolis? With head and heart meet, or head and hands meet in the heart, or something like that.
mm.
These sort of
I think it
ways
is
of
Fritz Lang.
thinking
I think you're
about
right.
human beings as, in the metaphorical sense of heart, head, hands, as these sort of faculties we have, I think is a really interesting way that the original series sums up a world that was vanishing in its problems, right? From Uhura and Kirk kissing to the um wonkiness of like Loci and the um the all the pieces of the original series that the rest of Star Trek canon has subsequently attempted to either smooth out or find some way to simply accept as read and move on from. Uh, like the woolly, unpredictable quality of the original series is one of the things I love about it, because nothing was truly set. It was just this like totally wonderfully grandiose vision of a world that had found peace enough to go on like these adventures,
Yeah,
just of discovery and learning. Uh,
yeah. And it was more about those adventures that piece gave them the
mhm,
opportunity
mhm.
to take. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, those relationships are fostered within that sense of like a kind of camaraderie of exploration. Uh, I mean, you get the kind of triumvirate of Kirk, Bones, Spock out of that for sure, but
yeah,
uh, that may as much be about the realities of TV and camera time and the number of lines people get as anything else, right? Because we get a ton of great characters out of that other series have been riffing on ever since, from Scotty to um, one of my favorites, Romulan Commander. The great
Romulan commander, indeed.
noble enemy, right? Yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's yeah.
Of course, we got the return of Romulan command.
Oh yeah,
Fantastic
man.
stuff on Strange New Worlds.
So good.
Yeah. Well, and I think the legacy of Kirk also kind of rings true. That because it's mostly the Kirk and Spock show. You could say the same thing for what I'm about to say about Kirk. That kind of applies to McCoy as well. But I think what it's been the real legacy of Kirk has, I don't think, permeated pop culture and perhaps even philosophy the way Spock has. But what it has done, is informed how not just human Starfleet characters are played, but especially human captains. Like
Yes.
what captains are basically was defined by Kirk, and you could kind of argue that all the other captains are just a slight variation, or sometimes not so slight, but just a variation of Kirk.
Yes. Well,
They're like
they're
noble and loyal, but they'll break the rules when they have to, but they prefer to follow the book, of course, and like they're all basically that character. But
well,
I think that's
I think that he establishes that fundamental like basis point from which they've all got, or he's a fundamental reference for them all. You know, there's no other
yeah.
Starfleet captain after Kirk uh, that can uh, happen without reference to Kirk.
Mhm,
Exactly.
mhm.
Yeah, I couldn't
And
agree more.
as for the show, I think its greatest legacy, other than of course, like you say, some of the things like Bella Loci, some of the
Hmm.
kind of buttons they were pushing at the time as far as cutting
Hmm.
edge social storytelling and that sort of stuff.
Sure.
But it's it was just its greatest legacy is giving birth to the rest of Star Trek, which as you say,
Yes, you're right. Its
expanded.
legacy is Star Trek. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
its legacy is Star Trek. Yeah,
Well,
I
now
think
that's
that's
a
the
really
best way to
interesting
put it.
point you make because it establishes something about legacy that makes it a really uphill struggle for subsequent iterations, right?
Yeah,
Because
I would say so.
if the original series has the legacy of the rest of Star Trek, every other series has to look at its legacy as kind of lensed around that, right? Like we can't create the whole thing new, but what do we add? What
Does
approach do
it
we take,
always?
right? Like,
Yes. Does TOS
does it
forever
always
have the
predominate?
biggest legacy
Yeah,
of
exactly.
all?
Does it
Like,
forever
if they made
predominate?
another 4 seasons of Picard and then a TNG revival series for another few seasons,
Yeah,
does its legacy still pale compared to the original series? Because it's all based on that. That's the funny thing about legacy, like you say.
yeah, and like in some sense, fundamentally, yes. Like, I mean, I think we're just sort of describing the logic of uh historical priority or like, that kind of thing, right? Like, why we end up thinking about our ancestors in certain ways, even, Uh they may be more remote, but they have some sort of strange hold over us in some sense. Um, yeah, right. Like it's the bones of everything else. Haha. Pun and not intended, but now I'm going to entirely, totally take
Yes. And
that.
use it 3 more times this podcast. So there's no
um,
bones about it, I'll tell you that.
that's right.
But
I got a bone to pick with that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but that in the animated series, right? They come pretty quickly after the other. But the animated series has an interesting legacy in itself in that it can portray the wildest stuff, completely free of the uh, limitations that its live action counterpart necessarily suffered in the late 60s,
Yeah, I would say its greatest legacy is Lower Decks, because it gave Lower Decks license to do all that crazy stuff. It's just like, no, you can have people with a third arm coming out of their chest. You can have whatever you want. It's like there was crazy stuff on TOS as far as that kind of stuff goes.
Oh, it was
It
amazing.
gave us Cations.
And the Kzinti, right? And yeah, all sorts of like those dudes who are made out of mushrooms and fungus, right? The yeah, I think and one of the neat things about particularly, we've mentioned this before, but one of the about the Cations and the Kzinti in particular is that this is a whole other fictional realm by Larry Niven that gets folded into this somehow in a way that isn't truly ever entirely explained. And I wonder, it would be a fascinating dark piece of Starfleet history to explore, would be the wars with the
Cation
Kzintis.
Kzinti,
Oh yeah,
or just the
because I mean,
Kzinti War with the Federation. Yeah.
because the Federation ultimately reduced the Kzinti to the point where they say you're not allowed to have starships with weapons anymore. Which is
That's pretty serious.
well, that's not that's I suppose Earth. It's not the Federation necessarily. Even I don't even know because I'm not sure that's entirely clear to me. But yeah, I mean the fact of folding in other notable, interesting science fiction authors, and for it to be a kind of like the original series and the animated series had a sort of Ellery Queen was for mysteries, but like um uh the great pulp magazines of science fiction of the 50s, 60s, 70s was like Nova and a bunch of those ones uh that had all of these guys publishing in them routinely. uh in some ways the early Star Trek series have that sort of feel, and in some ways I think TNG participates in that to some degree. You get DC Fontana and a number of those writers who are carryovers from folks who had worked in the original series,
Apparently,
also,
like the
contributing,
nearly the entire crew for the first season was just holdovers from the original series,
right?
and you
Yeah,
can tell. You can
they're kind of
tell.
getting the band back together, exactly.
Oh yeah, they got the band back together. But yeah, so and what you could say, what legacy does the TOS movies hold? And like certainly the Wrath of Khan has
Oh
resonated,
man.
and of course we see Khan coming back again and again,
Hmm.
at least the once, but we'll see him again.
Well, and in some ways, I'm curious about. I mean, the Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is a much maligned picture in some ways. They use wonky colors. They have strange uniforms. They
Bad
do weird.
uniforms. You can say bad.
They're bad. Oh, sure, they're bad. But the the feel of the whole thing reminds me of the original Event Horizon, which literally has, I think, like a 19-minute scene of a guy driving from his home to his work, and you just drive with him in the car the whole time. Like there are there's a whole set of cinema that I feel like it's referring to that used and was interested in these really long contemplative kind of shots
I felt like
that
2001: A Space Odyssey a bit too.
yeah, right, like there's some pieces of Kubrick, or like it's not like 7 hours like what was his name, Tar film or something like that, but uh some of these really long shots that you just kind of sit with to experience and feel. And uh I see someone who's looking for feline supplement number
Oh
47.
yes, he
um
certainly is. He is, my
Always,
boy.
yes.
He's a good cat,
um
and he is a pretty cat.
there's a cat entered the shot. We are remotely recording this tonight, so I'm in one spot and can see Davin on in another place. Davin, and that looks like, is that Parker there?
No, that's Miles.
Oh, it's
The chief.
Miles. The chief returns again. But no, I guess what I was thinking was like there's a whole like I feel like the motion picture is more like a concept album than
Hmm.
it is a traditional motion picture. Like it's trying to do these really interesting broad strokes things and invite you into this world that uh didn't get quite the same visual treatment on the silver screen, but that doesn't necessarily do it the favors it's hoping for,
Well, it's
you know?
interesting you say that because I kind of feel like the legacy of the next generation is a bit of a concept album because
Interesting.
um I mean obviously TOS was the original concept album, but it didn't do that very well. Like it was still so rampant with sexism and stuff like that. Whereas TNG tried to, and it was a different era of the
Mhm.
Federation and Starfleet,
Mhm.
where it was a little more Wild West, whereas like it's kind of Picard's era is sort of called the Age of Peace and Exploration, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So so it was supposed to give us what that looked like. And here's how this is the future. This is the great future we're looking for as far as
Mhm.
equality and that should be displayed on screen with the characters, but also in the storytelling.
Mhm.
And I feel like it failed that. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the next series. But so that's something. Just a little seed there I'll mention. I think
Mhm.
it's a bit of. I don't think it quite achieved that perception of the utopia.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I think it
yeah.
projected it, but there were yeah, I mean there are logical and ethical holes in that utopia that eventually in later seasons they get around to starting to ask themselves, but which more often than not, I think TNG was interested in asserting for the purposes of contrast,
Mhm.
um, and
I
not
mean, I guess I
necessarily
mean more
always
in.
for the purposes of world building.
I guess I mean
They
because they
assert a thing
still
to show the opposite of it.
they still didn't know how to write female characters in TNG. Like it's not until Deep
Oh,
Space Nine
sure.
where we finally get. I feel like it's darker. The utopia isn't as
Hmm.
utopia. It's dark and bad things happen,
Hmm.
but they everyone's written like people. Like finally, so it's like it's
Hmm.
finally a utopia where like everybody is there. Everyone's at the table. Like I feel like
But
it finally achieved that sense. But like I don't
sure.
want to wash over quickly the legacy of TNG though. It
Well, I
really
think.
did achieve that in a lot of ways. It achieved the morality of Star Trek. I feel like that's its great legacy.
Well, I would say, like, if I were to say anything, yeah, I would argue that, like, in one sense, the legacy of TNG is a sort of long form meditation on the life of principle.
Mhm.
Because like the Prime Directive is implicit in almost every single episode of TNG, pretty much on purpose, and the kinds of moral and philosophical conundra that the crew deal with are you're absolutely right. They're not um and partly because of the episodic quality, I think as well. They're not as fleshy or meaty every time as the DS9 episodes are, particularly as the DS9 seasons begin to concatenate. Uh One of the things that um strikes me rewatching TNG later on is that there is a kind of symmetry in the fact that the ship travels and it has this episodic quality, you know, and that is something that absolutely carries over from the original series, that sort of wagon train to the stars kind of idea. But Um, I think in some ways, one of the things that TNG deals with really beautifully is loneliness and the strangeness of space travel in an era where they believe that it's tamed, you know? And I felt like that was a kind of mirror of certainly my experience growing up in a world where, say, Francis Fukuyama had written that, history is over, it's achieved its end in 1990 or 91, with the fall of the Soviet Union. And so the world was sort of tamed, but clearly it has continued changing since then. Like it has
Not one of the
persistently,
best predictions ever.
right? Like I think Fukuyama's word is not necessarily borne out in the long run or even the medium short run. But that sense of a kind of world order that felt complete and finished, but kept finding these bubbling issues everywhere was, I thought, a really interesting feature of TNG as a series. That and just a bunch of people who tried to be professional together.
Yeah,
I
they
thought
did.
that was very interesting, right? And part of that's the legacy of Roddenberry saying they're not really allowed to argue all that much. But
Mhm.
uh, you know,
Star Trek has kind of lost that a bit since TNG for sure.
yeah, and in some ways, it's a
Voyager
deliberate
kind of carried
move
it
away
on
from it.
a bit.
Yeah, and they had a really interesting way of needing to have that. In a different way than some Starfleet crews might have. They desperately needed to be professional together, or they were going to be at each other's throats.
Yeah, like I think TNG is the template. Like when you say Star Trek, I think most of the things you think
Yes,
of probably come from that. Um,
yes, I think
Now,
that's
Deep
fair.
Space Nine, I think its legacy is being the greatest story ever told and a perfect show, and the acting is amazing. And I don't know what else you want to say. It's just perfect across the board.
Completely unbiased. Completely
Exactly.
unbiased.
My name doesn't say
Um,
Davan S9 right now at all on the.
no, no, that's true. It doesn't. I think we can both agree that the first two seasons of DS9 are really a process of feeling itself out.
True, but I'm a defender. I'm a defender of those. A lot of episodes in those seasons.
Oh no, listen, the Tosk episode shows up very early in season one, and that
I'm Tusk. You are Tusk. We're all Tusk.
that is a tremendous picture. But one of the most powerful pilots I've ever seen
Oh
has
yeah,
got to be Emissary parts 1 and 2, right? Uh,
100%.
and it started to show off on a kind of searing note that no other Star Trek series has ever come up to. They've had good pilot. Don't get me wrong. There's some great pilots, but there's not a single Star Trek pilot that comes up to the level of Emissary, and that sets a tone for the series to me that is scaldingly serious and vulnerable and brutal and unflinching in some ways, but also flinching in the interesting moments, right? Uh, like the things that the characters in the show shies away from, I think are sometimes as fascinating as the things it wants to get right out there in the open because uh, these things tended to be handled very self-consciously in a really self-aware way, I felt like. And it was really beautiful. There's a great cast of actors there, some of them
Oh
with
yeah.
huge Star Trek experience, but the sort of dialectical relationship between uh, the sort of level on which the prophets are operating and the sort of federation, that sort of meta story of the show and the lives of these characters as they weave in and out of the events of their lives. Uh, yeah, it was just so delicious to watch. People coming into their own with the character, like the way Kira develops over the series, uh, into this like absolute deep powerhouse of a character, for instance,
Well,
is
well,
wonderful.
well, that's what I think the real legacy of Deep Space Nine is, at least as this relation to Star Trek is for, other than being the greatest story ever told. It's that it's the show that showed that you can have like humans and aliens of all kinds, even Ferengi,
Hmm.
women, minority. You can write minorities, all these characters and people you can write with equal amounts of dignity and intelligence and capabilities. That's
Yeah,
like
you
it's
just
like the
write them
first
from
show I feel
inside
like in
down, right?
TV that ever did that, and a lot of that comes down to the performances as well, how they decided to play these characters. Where like even
Yeah,
like Armin Shimmerman will say like he took ownership of that
precisely.
character and he played it for seriousness, not for jokes.
Well, and interesting, like, and he had that desire for sort of redemption of his earlier performance as a Ferengi, which
Mhm. Yeah,
I
exactly.
think has like that speaks to a lot of what's happening in DS9. There's a lot of characters there that are seeking some kind of redemption. Garrick, Kira, Odo, Cisco, um, so many of them are seeking some kind of rehabilitation or renewal or rebirth or whatever it is. Even Ducat, in all his manic weirdness, is constantly seeking a kind of reaffirmation of who he says he is to everyone else. Uh, that play of identities, especially in a show about shapeshifters who can pretend to be anybody, I thought was like it's structurally just works so well all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so what do you think the legacy of Voyager is? I think it's the show that showed, again, as it relates to Star Trek. I think its legacy is
Mhm.
it's that shows that you can really go outside the box a bit. You don't have to be in the Alpha
I can
Quadrant.
see that.
Like I don't think you get a Discovery with all the crazy stuff they do with jumping 900 years in the future and all that sort of stuff
Hmm. Hmm.
without Voyager.
Well, and Voyager managed in that sense, I think, to like almost repostulate the spirit of the original series. That like let's just get out there and
The
see
new
stuff we
Wild
haven't seen
West.
before. Yeah,
We need a new Wild West.
but
Yeah.
while keeping it within the structure of the sort of Star Trek world that had developed beyond that series, right? And I love that,
What's old can
particularly
be new again.
yeah, right, like by throwing themselves 70,000 light years away from everything they know. It highlights what's been there, particularly because it's just this tiny island of Starfleet life, like desperately trying to survive through the Delta Quadrant. But yeah, like it allowed for all sorts of weird and wild tales to be told, that didn't have to conform to the Klingons, Romulans, sort of stuff that had been very, very well mapped out in the two previous series, particularly. You know, uh,
And of course, it
and
put a lot
you
of
make a
focus
good
on the
point, though.
female characters as well, and
Yeah,
it has that legacy as well, the first female captain. But
yeah,
also, you know, it's one of its great big legacies is the way it handled the Borg and
yeah,
elaborated on the
sure,
Borg. That's
sure.
carried forward quite a bit. Uh,
Well, I
and
don't think
certainly
you'd have
Seven of Nine.
the Picard series and its whole
Yeah.
logic without Voyager, particularly,
Mhm.
or great cameos in Lower Decks, or all sorts. I love the conversation that Boimler has with his Tom Paris plate, for instance. That is just a wonderful moment. He's like succumbing to the gas.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
It's
But
pretty
yeah,
good.
I think one of the other things I really enjoyed about Voyager in particular was the different things they decided to do with the spaceship. Landed on a planet, do varieties of things with it that, partly were about the visual effects, sort of context in which they found themselves, but took advantage of it in really clever ways, you know. So they allowed the crew to have to find their way to being uh, sort of unified in.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I like is they never entirely lost sight of the Maquis Federation dynamic. It got
No.
less and less over the years, but from Suitor
Every
to other
season would have
characters,
that episode that would
yeah,
bring
it
it
would
up.
always bubble up a
Like,
little bit again, right?
yep. And I thought that was
Uh,
smart.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it never quite goes away, even though you do integrate and find new identities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, there's a
Well,
lot
because
to
it's
say
the
that's good
shaky
about
ground
Voyager.
the castle was built on, So
Exactly. That initial
uh,
compromise, right?
yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Well,
and
I
I mean,
think the only
there's
other
again
yeah, go ahead.
the problem of representation in the sense of Chakotay's character comes up again. Not that it's, I mean, the trouble is it gets something gets stuck to Beltran because I don't really want to say the other guy's name. Also, I forget it because I'm bad with names. But uh, like that's one area that Trek, uh, I don't know, continues to fall down on. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but um, it's one of those areas where I like it that Star Trek has continued to work to be a kind of self-correcting entity, right? So
Yeah.
that yes, of course we're going to make mistakes. How else are we going to learn stuff than by making mistakes? And they got duped by somebody, and that's really uh, made for some unfortunate stuff in those moments, and some wonky things in the episodes where they really go into like Chakotay's spirituality.
Mm.
But they can own that and move on from it, right? And I think some of the impulses in New Trek are, have that implicit in them in some ways. Some of those moments where they miss the mark that way.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think we're gonna leave all the newer Trek shows off of this episode, really, because they're too new for a legacy discussion. We'll
Well,
see. Their legacies we'll see.
they're
Um,
responding to a lot of the legacy stuff we're talking to here,
yeah,
right? They're
exactly. But we
called
should talk
legacy
about
things, but
Enterprise
yeah, we should.
for a moment.
Yeah.
And
It's the little
I
show
guess
that tried.
its biggest legacy though might be the prequel, like, but just the entering
Oh,
prequels into the
yeah,
equation, and like
yeah.
I don't know that that's a good legacy. No, I love
Well,
Enterprise, but I think its ongoing legacy that might be its
the
biggest.
I mean, its other legacy is that darn theme song because, like, you just cannot. That is a
Learn not
trespass
to do
against
that
Star
again.
Trek. Like, you need your trumpet, you need your strings,
Hmm.
and maybe a bit more of a brass section where the ba ba comes in. But that was not it. Uh, that out of the way, I think you're absolutely right. There are some real dynamic challenges in terms of like how you do a prequel well. I liked how far they went back with Enterprise.
Oh yeah. If you're gonna do
Uh,
one, I think that's why I enjoyed it. I wanted to see how the Federation was built. Like,
yeah, and it
it's a
was
great
just
time to go.
between First Contact and the original series, right? Like it's a good distinct period. Uh,
Things that are like,
but
we're 20 years before Kirk, and this one's 5 years before Kirk, and like the next one will be 2 years before Kirk, and it's just like,
Yeah,
come on now.
and those things just, I mean, those things are, I feel, are more about a schedule of content production that can keep pace with people's potential eyeball real estate than they are about um than they are about, you know, producing something that speaks to interesting moments or things to explore that would do enough to constitute like a bold new strange new world, you know. And the strange new world there particularly was the Vulcan human relationship, and you know, the just the bumbling adventures of these crazy pinkskins, as Shran loves to call us, running around trying to figure out what to do in a corner of space that we have absolutely no concept of. That was one of the things I loved about Enterprise the most. That they just, you could see it, and as a viewer, there was this distinct sense of irony about the whole show, because like, you guys have no idea what you're doing, but they also got into stuff so close to Earth that we never really looked at it too much in other series. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
that I liked the sense of smaller scale,
Hmm.
uh, the sense that the ship was so incredibly fragile that it was like somewhere between a space shuttle and the Enterprise 1701 that we know and love. You know, like they don't have shields, they don't even really have very good phasers for the, they have what, like some kind of particle
They
cannons for the
look good
first
though.
season. They
Yeah.
look good, but they're terrible,
Yeah, they're
especially for the
terrible.
first couple of seasons, right?
Yeah.
You see the vulnerability of Earth at that moment, right? There's a lot of that. Again, you know, and if Voyager hadn't gone outside the box, I don't think Enterprise would have had the room to go
Yeah, true enough.
as far outside the box as they did.
Yeah. Well, why don't we
So the
tie a
Zuni were
bow
great
on
fun.
this here? What do we
All
think the
right.
legacy of Star Trek is?
What do I think the legacy of Star Trek is? For me,
I
that
mean,
this
it's
is what I
obviously
can
it's
speak of.
ongoing. But
Yeah, but ultimately, I think the legacy of Star Trek is that we can do something better than we have before. Whether that's uh, right back to the failure represented in Loci and Bella, or whether that's the um, the sort of initial redemption story in Farpoint Station, or the overarching arc of, you know, the prophets from emissary right to the uh what we leave behind. uh those arcs are all about um the ways we can do better, because we can always do a different thing than we did before, you know.
I think as far as that's well said. But I think as far as what its legacy is as fiction, as content,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, I think that as science fiction, I think that you can tell great stories in a positive, overall positive future. Whereas like all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other sci-fis are dystopias and it's always horrible. And it's the struggle against that. I find it more
Hmm.
interesting the struggle against maintaining your great society you've achieved. Like,
Sure. There's
well,
something beautiful about that, right? Like, and these are societies that can look back on pasts and say there were moments when we were very far from where we are now, and we thought we were much closer than we were. You know,
hmm,
so let's
that's the
give
Deep
the
Space Nine in the equation. It's just
right?
like
Like that
you get
exactly.
TNG where we think we're in this utopia, and DS9 is just like, no, we're not quite as far as we think we are, and that's what
Yeah.
was beautiful about Deep Space Nine too.
Yes. There's the sense of maturity in that. You're like, oh man, a moment ago I thought we were so far ahead of these things. But that one, the beautiful conversation between Cassidy Yates and Ben Sisko may be the heart of Star Trek. Let's not look at it as it was.
About the holodeck.
Let's remember it as it could have been. And I think
Should have been.
that beautiful sense of a vision that can
Well said, yeah.
cast out something even into the future that says, let's think about what it should be and strive toward that as opposed to just fearing what it could be or what it might turn into. That's ultimately the promise of Star Trek. And that's
Oh,
certainly
yeah.
why I love it.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can perhaps bring this. I think our transmission may be breaking up for the second
Indeed.
time.
That's right. Let's boldly go back into the docking bay and set this shuttle down. All right. In that case, end transmission.
Damn. Oh, that was nasty.
Why did we walk into that gas cloud?
Why did we walk into that?
My bad. That was my idea. But,
I see two suns.
are those the stars we walked into the gas cloud with?
I don't know. They look different to you.
What?
Just a sec. Who's the Bolian guy?
There's no Bolian guy.
Blue, line up the middle of him. He's a Bolian.
That is a Bolian guy.
Think he's with the Orion Syndicate?
He's a Bolian. Of course he's with the Orion Syndicate.
Hey guys, it's about time you got here. Well, we have been traveling for some time at warp 3.4.
You're supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. Go, go, go!
Well, all right. Popular demand. Did you hear that?
Back in the Hello Mirror Universe!
What's up, my universe?
Or as we call it, Prime Universe!